ultimately the difference between someone who actually makes it and someone who doesn't is whether or not they take action. And the other thing too is when you work with the best artists, so when you're working on Broadway or you're working with people who have just been at the top of the game, there's one thing that I keep on noticing again and again and again, which is the best artists love their craft.
Hello and welcome to another Parousia Podcast. I'm Charbel Raish, your host. And if you are one that loves storytelling and loves a good story and loves adventure, well, you've come to the right place. Today's episode and today's podcast is going to be with the creator of Merry Beggars, which have produced these exciting audio series on different topics. And at the moment, there is a famous series on the saints, which is featuring on relevant radio. And I've had the privilege to be listening to it with my family, and you're going to love it. Wait till we unpack what is this exciting ministry and apostolate. The founder is none other than Peter Atkinson, and he joins me from the United States now. Hello, Peter. How are you doing?
Hello, Charbel. Hello, Australia. It's good to talk with you.
Yes, welcome. It's great to learn about your apostolate. It is fantastic. Merry Beggars. I can't wait to dive in here, but very quickly, just for those who've just never heard of Merry Beggars, just in a snapshot, what is Merry Beggars?
Yeah, so the Merry Beggars is the entertainment division of Relevant Radio. We produce original audio entertainment for the whole family in a culture which is trying to undermine the faith in every family around the world. We're an antidote towards that, helping parents and families have stories and form imaginations and hearts that go towards adventure, courage, and fall in love with God. That's the purpose of what we're doing, and that shows up by doing productions like A Christmas Carol or On the Night Train or The Saints, which is the most explicitly Catholic Christian series we're doing. But the whole point is God needs us to tell his story, and his stories are told through the lives of the saints. So we're trying to bring those stories to families around the world.
Yeah, awesome. I'm absolutely loving it, by the way. We completed St. Patrick. My children love it.
Good.
And I have to say, like, as an adult, I'm enjoying it. And the older kids, as much as the younger kids, are loving it. So it's something the whole family can really listen to. So congratulations on it.
That was our plan from the beginning of, how do you tell a story where it's accessible by a 7-year-old, by a 6-year-old, by a 9-year-old, but then a 30-year-old, a 40-year-old can listen to it, recognize the production quality, recognize the quality of the acting, and get excited by it. My sense is that we've hit a certain, we've sort of done that with the Saint series, but then I'm always looking on ways to improve it as well.
Awesome. And just so people know, we are specifically focusing on audio. These are audio stories with sound effects and characters, and it's dramatized. It's fantastic.
Exactly. So, and one of the advantages of doing audio specifically is we are able to produce hundreds of stories for less than 1/100th of the cost of an independent film. So an independent film, in terms of its life cycle, it spends a couple of years in development, developing the story, forming relationships with producers. Then you spend a year or two fundraising. Then you spend like 30 days filming, and then you spend a year editing or half a year editing. And then it gets seen by maybe a couple of thousand people. But if you hit it really big, you might get seen by like maybe a couple of 10,000 people. And that's one story. What I love about audio is from last September through next June, we will be releasing about 165 episodes, working with between 300 and 400 actors, 8+ sound designers. I think we're working with 4 or 5 directors at this point, and I think we have around 8 or 9 writers working on different series, and we're doing all of that for less than just a fraction of the cost of an independent film. And the beautiful thing about that is not only are we able to tell a lot of stories, but families are forming a habit of every single day as a family discovering part of the faith. And it's as easy as hitting play. Like that's the beauty of audio is we're able to reach a vast audience every single day with stories that, if you made them into films would require hundreds of millions of dollars.
Wow, that's great. I've never thought of it that way. You've just sort of summarized that in a powerful way. I didn't realize how big the productions were, so that's amazing.
Well,
Oh,
we
wow.
warmed ourselves up to it when the Merry Beggars started. Well, when the Merry Beggars really started doing audio was in 2020. COVID had just shut down all of our other operations. I needed to figure out if we were just going to shut down the nonprofit, which is doing sort of, and we can talk about this too. It was doing sort of like in-person events and whatnot. And instead I pivoted to doing audio. And our first audio project was me in a room in my parents' house, recording actors remotely and stitching it together. And then the next one was a little bit more ambitious of a couple of people in the studio together. And then the next one was even more ambitious of recording for 10 hours a day for 6 weeks with 40 actors. And then this one is the most ambitious thing we've done yet. So at some point I need to say, okay, that this is enough. We can sort of plateau here because otherwise, we'll be like thousands of actors, which is just insane. So,
Yeah.
and praise God, we pulled it off so far. So, the Saints has been recorded very well. We're still recording more and more every month. And by the grace of God, the right people have come onto the project and just brought a huge level of experience in the entertainment industry to help lift this off the ground.
That is awesome. Now, I hope you're going to keep going with the Saints. Like, just keep rolling out different stories of different Saints?
That's the hope. So we have 33 series planned through June of next year. What we're working on right now is getting the word out to as many people as possible to grow our audience. And then at some point to invite people to become donors and to support this
Yeah.
work. We give all of this away completely for free. And there's two reasons for that. One is Jesus says, freely have you received, freely shall you give. So our whole idea is these aren't our stories. We don't want to gate these. If you're middle class or upper middle class, then you can hear the story of the saints. Like, no, we want to give these away to everyone. And then the other reason is that so far God has made this possible. And so we don't want to start second guessing him. People have stepped up to donate. The Merry Beggars started itself because of one person's donation who believed in my vision back in 2017 in Ave Maria, Florida. And every step of the way when we say to our audience, we need your support to help bring these stories, people step forward. So if that continues happening, if we're able to continue this ministry, continue these productions, then our plan is not only to do more saint stories, but lots of more fun things that we have planned.
Yeah, praise God. Awesome. Now let's talk a little bit about yourself, Peter. You're originally from Canada, is that right? And grew
That's
up
right.
in Washington, D.C., and
That's
now
right.
live in Chicago. So tell us, how did all that happen? And I do understand, is there some link to World Youth Day Sydney? Do we have some link? Is it your? So you have to touch on all this.
There's a thread of a link through my father. So my father, yes, we were born in Canada, fellow members of the Commonwealth, and my dad was an Anglican priest.
Wow.
He was in Canada as an Anglican priest, and my mom and he had 5 children. At that point, I'm the 6th, and right between the 5th and the 6th, they were both discerning. It became very, very clear to them that there were issues in the Anglican Church that could not be answered without an argument from authority. And the Anglican Church did not have the authority, did not want to claim that authority, and didn't have the solid foundation underneath its feet that the Catholic Church does, as the church founded by Jesus Christ, which is pretty solid foundation. Like that's something you can rest your feet on. And then I remember my mom wrote a letter to one of the, she'll probably be embarrassed me saying this, but she wrote a letter to one of the bishops in the Anglican hierarchy asking, what is your teaching on contraception? What is your teaching on abortion? What is your teaching on, I think it was those 2 things, maybe something else, because she was searching for clarity and for truth. And the bishop
Yes.
wrote back, I think it was a bishop, they wrote back and said, basically, discern, use your conscience, discern, which is, not a great answer. And so that was a step in my mom and dad's journey of realizing that the deposit of faith, the foundation, was in the Catholic Church. So my dad's an Anglican priest. He ends up being out of a job because generally they like the Anglican Church clergy to still be Anglican. And so he was just unemployed for a bit, doing odd jobs, carpentry on this island in Canada called Grand Manan Island. And he ended up doing graduate school at the John Paul II Institute in Washington, D.C. And because of that, my whole family moved to the United States. This is back in 1993 or 4. I was a wee babe in arms. And so I grew up in Washington, D.C., surrounded by this like really thick Catholic academic ethos, which was fantastic. And because of that, because of my parents discerning into the Catholic Church, because of my dad studying at the JP2 Institute, I end up growing up with this amazing community of homeschool families in Washington, D.C., Catholic homeschoolers. I'm pretty sure last count, about 9 of my friends are priests, and I'm sure there's a smattering of nuns. Like, it was just really fruitful, stable, healthy, sane Catholic homeschooling community. So I ended up going to Ave Maria University. No, it's a huge blessing. My brother's a monk too, to throw that in too.
Wow.
So a lot of fruitfulness. I ended up going down to Ave Maria University, studying classics there. I had the idea of doing entertainment as sort of a career was the furthest thing from my mind. My dad is a theologian. I thought I was going to become an academic. That's sort of what my professors were telling me. And then senior year, I had done a bunch of Shakespeare in my undergrad. Senior year, someone says, some of you will go on to become priests, businessmen, professors, entertainers, so on and so forth. And she referenced my performance as Bottom in Midsummer Night's Dream that I had done that year. And it sort of hit me. I was like, wait a second, that was an option? Like, I thought respectable people weren't entertainers, right? Like, you had to take a real job. And I kid you not, like that one, it was Julie Cosson was the administrator of Ave who said that. That one phrase of that path was opened up to me literally just sparked something in me that opened up a floodgate that had been in me before. So I had done 11 years of theater growing up. I'd done Shakespeare in college. It was always the thing. Performing, entertaining was always the thing that brought me the most life, that allowed me to give the greatest gift to other people. Like, I just absolutely loved it. Long story short, I end up founding a Shakespeare study program at a local high school, studying Shakespeare in Massachusetts, then in London, and then going to grad school at Columbia University and getting my MFA in acting there. I end up doing some fun things, starring off Broadway, doing some great acting work there. And while I was in Columbia University, I was founding what would become the Merry Beggars. It was just a small nonprofit that I was creating. I was working outside of classes, waking up early, going to bed late. And without God's providence, it totally would have died. I didn't know what I was doing. We were doing sort of an in-person conference in New York City. It was going to be this huge hullabaloo to get high school teachers in, train. It was a whole thing. COVID shut it down completely. And so I started doing these audio productions. And these audio productions, I had grown up listening to old radio theater. I had absolutely loved it. So it was sort of a natural pivot to go from doing acting theater to producing audio drama and radio theater. And there's a lot of little providential moments in there that I won't bore you with, but needless to say, God was sort of guiding this. My wife and I get married in 2020. And at that point, all of theater across the entire United States, the career that I had just spent a bunch of money on training in, and a lot of my years training in, is completely shut down, right? People complain in the United States, complain about graduating into like the 2008 recession economy. This is like graduating into the bubonic plague. Like, there's just nothing. So we're doing audio dramas. There's no money in it. I can't raise a family on it. Early 2021, my wife, Naomi, and I sit down and we're sort of considering things, weighing things, and figuring out, we want to have as many children as God sees fit to send us. We want to have a big Catholic family, God willing. And there's just no way that the Merry Beggars in its current state is going to be able to support that. And like every Catholic dad listening, you have to support your family. push comes to shove, you're going to do what it takes to support your family. And so I was saying, okay, should I give up on the Merry Beggars? Should I stop doing this? And Naomi, my wife, to her credit, she said, no, let's give it a year. Let's consecrate it to St. Joseph and see what happens. Well, we consecrated to St. Joseph. That was in January. In February, and any American listener will know, in February there's the Super Bowl, right? Which is football, not soccer.
Yes,
It's football, American
that's right.
football. I don't care about sports generally as a rule, but my wife does. So I thought we need to go watch the Super Bowl. So I call up one of my friends in DC and say, hey, where are you going to watch the Super Bowl? Invite me. Not a very polite thing to do, but he's a good friend. And he did invite me. We went to this lawyer's house. And this lawyer was a pro-life lawyer in Washington, D.C., sort of a mover and shaker. Really fun evening. They end up being really interested in the Merry Beggars. And so I tell them a lot about it. I think nothing more of it. Great evening, lovely party. We had a wonderful time. Go back home. Well, unbeknownst to me, in 2020, Relevant Radio, who I was not involved with in any way at that point, Relevant Radio was in a bit of a pickle. They were getting ads for pro-abortion politicians on their network because by FCC regulation, FCC is the American Federal Communications Commission, you have to accept ads from any political candidate. And so they were having to accept ads automatically. No, there's no human intervention. They
Wow.
were having ads on the network by by some pro-abortion politicians, which, if you know anything about Relevant Radio is the most pro-life organization outside of like a pregnancy clinic or something. Like, it's just, we literally have a memorare meter praying for an end to abortion on our homepage. Like, pro-life is who we are.
Wow.
So this was a huge crisis. Father Rocky thought about it, and he decided it would be better to just tank the whole business and not compromise on mission on the pro-life issue than to compromise and say, well, it's federal law, it's maybe remote material cooperation, not foreign.
Yeah.
So like, you can come up with some moral theology. Like, I'm sure there's some rationalization if you wanted it. As he told me, he said, well, needless to say, Relevant Radio went from a commercial station, which has to accept all ads from political candidates, to a non-commercial station overnight. And the way they did that was they called a lawyer who had connections in Washington, D.C., and who was able to fast track that transition. And it could have tanked the entire network because a huge portion of the revenue was from commercials and whatnot. And just switching business models overnight is generally not a good business practice. They ended up actually raising more money because people saw them taking a stand for life in a way that put their entire work at risk, which to me is like just an unbelievable mark of integrity and credibility. Well, it turns out the lawyer that they had called was the same lawyer that I went to for a Super Bowl party. And because of that one connection, he ends up putting me in touch with Father Rocky. And at the end of the first phone call with Father Rocky says, you need to come work for me. And so now I'm working for him in Chicago. And now the Merry Beggars went from me and my parents' home trying to produce some audio dramas that would get maybe a couple of thousand listens to getting millions of downloads and reaching hundreds and thousands of families. And the beautiful thing about that story is it's so evident that God coordinated this, because it was in no one's mind. No one was thinking like, oh, let's get the Merry Beggars and Relevant Radio together. That was on no one's radar. And then it's so beautiful. I just see, I love unpacking the hand of providence, because my wife's motion for that we should consecrate this to St. Joseph, that we should give it a year, and if God wants this ministry to flourish, then God will help it flourish. Consecrating it to St. Joseph, that act of faith in a dark closet where we couldn't see what that would affect, combined with Father Rocky's leadership at Relevant Radio to just say, you know what, this is worth it. We're going to take a leap of faith and cut our legs out from under ourselves. Those two acts of faith together allowed Providence to bring the Merry Beggars to where it is now, which is millions of downloads and hundreds of thousands of families, and hopefully, God willing, impacting the culture for Christ. I know that's a
Praise
long
God.
story, but it's just such an incredible thread of how God uses us despite our sinfulness and brokenness for His glory.
Amen. Well, thank you. You gave us an express version of everything, and now we've got that snapshot. Now I've got so many little points here I have to dive in. There's a couple of things, quite a few things, but I just wanted to go back to first and foremost. So, mum and dad, Catholic. They've had you. You were born a little baby. You moved to America. How many children are there in the family?
Six kids.
6 kids. Wow. And they became Catholic, left the Anglican Church, joined the Catholic Church. Did he have the option of becoming a Catholic priest? I know that's common in sometimes in those conversions.
He did. I asked him about that, and he just said he didn't feel called to it.
Okay.
So my dad, his name is Dr. Joseph Atkinson. I'll give him a plug here, Dr. Joseph Atkinson. He is an academic and an intellectual. So he's an Old Testament theologian. If you find him, on a Sunday afternoon, he'll either be translating ancient Jewish water purification rituals or reading an Agatha Christie murder mystery, one of the two. And so he, I think, felt very called to teaching and education and study. And that's where his life's work has been on the family covenant and on the theology of the family, which is obviously very, very much needed. And he actually, it's funny, he said to me, that he thought that what I was doing with the Merry Beggars was sort of a practical extension of his work in the theology of the family, which I thought was really, really beautiful.
That's cool. Yeah, absolutely. Wow. So he's obviously very active. And does he have so people can find him? Are you saying he's online as well, if they want to know about his story?
I think so. But he is also such an academic that I think his website hasn't been updated for many years. But you can, he teaches at the JP2 Institute for Studies on Marriage and Family, and he has a book published in Washington, D.C. And he has a book published on the theology of the family.
Yeah,
as
fantastic.
well. So if you look up Dr. Joseph Atkinson, you'll find
I have to hear his story one day. But and then homeschooling. I myself homeschool my children.
It's awesome.
We got 9 ourselves, and we found what helps is having a network of homeschoolers. So that really helps the parents as well as the children with the social element. So just looking back on that and the impact that's had for you and the opportunities it's created sounds. Yeah, are you thinking now as a parent? You've got a little one, is that right? A little child?
We have a little whirlwind, a little terror, and one on the way due in April. So your listeners,
praise God. Yeah, we'll be praying for it. Yeah. Will you continue that family tradition? You're thinking of homeschooling your wife and 100%. Yourself, or
So 100%. It's funny. My early on in marriage, I think our first year, my wife, she was teaching 4th grade at a Catholic school. And I was working on the Merry Beggars, and we're in her bedroom, and she sort of looks at me and she wants to have this serious conversation. And she says, Peter, I want to ask you something. And I was like, oh, okay, what is it? And she said, she was sort of nervous, and she said, I wonder if you would maybe be open to me staying home and homeschooling the kids. And my reaction immediately was like, yeah, of course, that's what I want too. But I had been sort of hesitant to say it because I didn't want to put, undue pressure on my wife to, necessarily forego work that she wanted to do, or I don't know if she wanted that, so on and so forth. But it was very much on her heart. She has a deep, deep heart for children and for forming other children and for education and teaching. And so that's very much on her heart. And then for me, my experience in homeschooling, on one hand, it's the only thing I've ever known. But on the other hand, I've taught at a private Catholic school, and I've known a lot of people who went to public schools and whatnot. And I would not be able to do what I do today if I had been in a public school. And there's a very practical reason for that. ever since I was a very, very young child, I've had an extremely high level of energy, very, very high level of drive. So I would wake up at 4 a.m., do all of my schoolwork, all of my homework, much to the, I'm sure anxiety and chagrin of my parents. My parents would wake up at like 6:37. I would show up, present to them all of my work for the day done already. And then I would spend the rest of the day teaching myself stop motion animation or teaching myself, drawing or art or reading or whatever. And looking back on it, it's like, well, that was so much of my education was self-directed with my parents' guidance and whatnot.
Yes.
And when I was, for anyone who's ever done any animation work, especially stop motion animation, you're spending 10 to 13 hours just like moving tiny objects and taking photos. It makes stamp collecting look thrilling. And while I was doing that, I would listen to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of old radio episodes. And so those two things combined of like nurturing this deep discipline and love for art at the same time as, listening to these old radio shows and just cultivating my imagination. I never once, when I was homeschooled, felt my creative spirit being stifled. Not once. I can't remember a single time that my parents or my peers shut down my creative spirit. Never once. And so for me, it was just, there were difficulties along the way, as there always will be. But for me, it was just so obviously the environment that I needed to flourish. And the cool thing is all of the work that I'm doing now draws on all of the formation I received from my parents while homeschooling.
That is awesome. That's awesome. Great shout out. And thank you for sharing that. And that's great. It's one of the things, pros and cons and everything. But in this regard, I love the flexibility and the way you can tailor make the education and really speed things up and focus in on each child.
Well, and the other thing I would say, and I'll say this to your listeners, is for your listeners who, and I realize everyone's situation is different, right? You might not be able to homeschool because of one thing or another, or some child might have special needs or something that needs extra attention. So I don't think there is one size fits all. For the people who do feel the call to homeschooling or who have discerned that, I want to encourage everyone listening or watching, because it is such a service to the church, a service to the world, and a service to your children. If you're handing your children over to a public school or even to a private school, because you never know what's happening inside those walls all the time, you're at risk of the culture of your family not making it to your children. You're at risk of the culture and the tradition and the faith of your family having, someone intercept in between you and your children, just by the fact that they would be spending, 8, 9, whatever hours with other people who are forming them. Now, God willing, they're amazing people, but for the people who are able to homeschool, it's such a gift to be able to give them your heart every single day, in and out, form them in the faith. And then the other thing I'll say is, I'm still best friends with my siblings. I don't know if that would have happened if we had been in a different environment. So our current plan, I mean, who knows? Francesca, our daughter, might outbox us and make us send her to a private school. She's more energy than any child we've ever met. But our plan right now is to homeschool and see if we can't hand that on to our children.
Yeah, Brad, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Praise God. Ave Maria, you went to university there. Now, this is a place, just to paint a picture for people who outside of America who don't know. Am I right? This is a sort of a town, right? Is this so there's a university that's built inside of a Ave Maria town that's built around a church. That's the idea is that it's like Catholic community. This concept of a Catholic community. Can you just unpack Ave Maria University? I'm hearing all stories. The founder of Domino's, is he the one involved that's founded this? And we hear all these stories from the other side of the world. What is Ave Maria University and the town it's in?
So this is probably going to be the most American sounding story to a non-American. There was this guy, Tom Monahan, who founded a pizza company, Domino's. You may have heard of it. Made a ton of money. Read C.S. Lewis. was convicted and converted and ended up, and a lot of people don't know this, he ended up funding the catechism. So the catechism was
Wow.
actually largely, if not entirely, funded by Tom Monahan from his pizza money. And not satisfied with that, because I think he felt very convicted that he needed to give away all his money before he died. He ended up starting a law school, Ave Maria Law School, and a university. And in 2007, the university was founded, and it is currently in Ave Maria, Florida, so a town named after the university. And the whole idea of it was to form an authentically Catholic university in the heart of the church, ex corde ecclesia. From the heart of the church, there would be a formation of students, formation of professors, and this would contribute to strengthening the church at a time that the church really needs to be strengthened. And it started in 2007. In 2008, there was the housing crisis in the United States. And unfortunately, the university had tied a lot of its financial plans to selling a lot of housing around the university. So there was some really dicey times between 2007 and 2013. So I went there from 2011 to 2015, near its early stages, and it was an unbelievable education. I was taught by so many professors that were just, from Harvard, some were from MIT, just like Catholics who had left these prestigious institutions because they believed in the mission of Ave Maria. And so I remember my senior year, I would study Shakespeare and rehearse as Bottom in Midsummer Night's Dream, then go to my professor's house to translate Aristotle in Greek, then go to another classroom to translate Aquinas in Latin and study the metaphysics, and then, so on and so forth. So it was just like, it was unbelievably rich and really vibrant. And then the beautiful thing is, over the past couple of years, now that the housing crisis is in the rearview mirror, every time I go back to the university, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of new homes being built every year. So the community around it has really shot up and started thriving, and the university is, has hopefully its brightest years ahead of it.
Yeah, wow, how exciting! Well, I mean, just the concept, what one man can do. So Tom Manahan's still with us, right?
That he is. His wife recently passed away, so you can say a prayer for his wife. He is no spring chicken, so he also still has, he's constantly going. You'll see him at fundraisers, and he's very alert and planning and making moves. So he's very much still affecting things. And then I sort of Easter egg, if you ever do visit Ave Maria University and you go in front of the church, you'll see a little tile in front of the church, about probably 100, 200 feet in front of the doors, where there's a little stone with a domino symbol right in the center of it. So it's sort of hilarious, and I think it's a testimony to just American ingenuity that someone started a pizza company and ended up founding a university.
Wow, that's fantastic. What a story.
Yeah.
Well, let's pray for him, and love to get him on the show one day. Wouldn't that be awesome? Now, you've graduated. You have this opportunity now. Apply your skills, your passion, your love, your desires. You found Merry Beggars, you've already touched on a bit how it all happened. Let's go and dive straight into, I guess, now. Obviously, it's now with Relevant Radio. Can you talk about then the first production you did with Merry Beggars?
Yeah. So, well, actually, I'll walk back a step a little bit. Where when I graduated Ave Maria University, I actually was going to go into politics. I was not thinking I was going to go into theater or drama whatsoever. I had gotten this job at this political philosophy think tank, and I had provisionally accepted it. And I felt it was super exciting, very prestigious, like really, I would have an expense account. It would have been super fun. but I felt something in my heart just not at peace with it. And I got invited to teach a local school, a Shakespeare class at a local school. And I said, no, thank you. I already have a job. But they pushed me and said, okay, fine, I'll teach one class. And I taught one class and I fell madly in love with it. I fell madly in love with teaching young children and teaching high schoolers about Shakespeare, about teaching them about theater, and about how beautiful stories and imagination and art can feed people's souls in a way that gives life that I had never seen happen in politics. And I remembered this one experience I saw where I had been at a political philosophy conference at Villanova University, and we were down in the basement floor talking about politics, this, and building community and American society and all this different things. And I just felt so deeply alone. Like there was something in that it just felt like people were talking about abstractions. No one was actually encountering each other. It just felt really, really like existentially alone. Like everyone was sort of trying to impress each other. It wasn't really encountering. And then I went up to the campus level of the university, and there was a funeral going on at the main church. And I went into the church, and the church was packed to the gills. And it was a funeral for this really simple priest who hadn't been flashy. He had, produced like praise and worship albums so that handicapped people could sing and praise and worship and, draw closer to Christ. And he had been sort of like a social activist priest, but it was so clear from the homily and from the people in the church that his life offered in that way had actually moved people's hearts. Like he had actually affected the culture. He actually had done something. And when I was weighing whether or not to do the political job or whether or not to work with high school students, that was the choice of like, am I in the basement talking about how society is falling apart, or am I actually trying to have my hands in the dirt of culture and do the hard work of really affecting people's hearts and moving the culture, which is less fun. And there's not really an expense account with that. And you don't get to fly around and whatnot. But that was sort of my discernment of, am I going to lay down my life for others, or am I going to pursue, sort of a political career? And you can do that in politics, but for me, that just was not my calling. So that was another instance where God was just very, very evidently at work and helping direct my path. Fast forward, Relevant Radio, first production. I had no idea what I was doing. No idea. I mean, I'm an actor, I'm a director, I'm a creative, zero idea. So we end up figuring out how we can record an audio production of A Christmas Carol with live actors in the room. And I end up spending 2.5 very intense weeks adapting Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol to 25 episodes so that you can listen to it like an audio advent calendar. And that was actually a tradition that my parents had given me. So it was sort of a homeschooling tradition. We would read one snippet from A Christmas Carol every day through Advent. And I thought, okay, this is great. I'll steal this idea from my parents and create this. So I adapted the script. We cast a ton of actors, and then we arranged about 10 mics in a circle with the mics facing outside, and had all the actors gathered around in front of his or her own mic, and got a ton of soundproof blankets and turned the Relevant Radio executive conference room into a makeshift recording studio. And then we spent, I think it was 2.5 or 3.5 days of just recording nonstop with, I don't know, I think it was like 20 or 30 actors cycling in and out. And we somehow got it done. And the day before we were recording, Ebenezer Scrooge dropped out. So we have found this actor on Actors Access, which is this casting website. We have found this great Scrooge, cast him, and then the night before we started recording, he just said, I'm out. I'm not doing this project. And he didn't contact us. It was his agent who told us, my client is not going to be doing this project anymore. I don't know whether it was because he realized we were a Catholic organization. He didn't want to be a part of Relevant Radio or whatnot. So we scrambled. We ended up pulling the actor that we had cast as Jacob Marley to play Ebenezer Scrooge, and we found a new actor to play Jacob Marley. And both of them turned out to be just unbelievably good at both of those roles, just like an amazing job casting it. And then the other thing was, where we really didn't know what we were doing, we were sound designing the next day's episode the day before. So we weren't like, a week ahead or 2 weeks ahead. We were designing December 13th episode on December 12th, and designing December 14th episode on December. Like, we were up against the wire every single day. And for those of you who know audio and sound design, we're using Adobe Audition, and we had no idea how to set up proper sound design projects or files. So it got to the point where to edit one tiny thing in an episode, like a footstep or a sound or a cape, the whole program would either crash or just take minutes and minutes and minutes to load. And so those were early days of what we were doing, but we cut our teeth on A Christmas Carol, and it's gotten hundreds and hundreds of thousands of downloads, and we're excited to re-release it this year. So it's really exciting. Wow.
Now, was that released when you were saying you were doing it the day before? The next day it's going to air? Is that how quick you're talking about?
Yeah.
24 hours? Wow.
Yeah. So it shouldn't have been that way, but we were up against the wire. We were up against the wire.
Oh, mate. Now, how long is each episode?
So for Christmas Carol, we made them really short. They were about like 10 minutes each.
Okay.
So it's short enough that you can sit down with your family, listen to them, so on and so forth. Other shows we've done, like On the Night Train, the episodes range between 30 and 40 minutes. And then the Saint series right now, the episodes are averaging between 10 and 15 minutes. What we found is that families and audience members really like the shorter snippets. So they like a 10, 12, 13, 14, 15-minute episode they can tune into every day. It becomes part of their habit, on their run, on their commute, at dinner, bedtime, whatever. The 30, 40-minute ones are a bit harder for people to commit to. So that's what we found.
So I love this concept now, this partnership, I guess, with Relevant Radio. For those who don't know, Relevant Radio is now, it's across America.
Yep.
Is it the largest Catholic network, or one of the largest Catholic radio networks?
Yeah, we're in range of, I think we reached 240 or 260 million people. We have over 200 radio towers across the United States, so it's pretty large.
So we're talking 24-hour, 7 days a week programming, Catholic programming. People can tune in. Obviously, it's going to be different. If you're tuning in on the analog, it's a different channel for every different region, right? So is it like a national channel?
It's a national channel. So that was one of the things that has allowed Relevant Radio to grow, is they moved away from doing local programming into national programming, which allows us to have one stream that is going through all the radio towers, all the stations across the entire country. And we have listeners around the world as well. You can download the Relevant Radio app and just stream for free. That's what I like doing, because in our area, we're north of Chicago. You don't get the best reception from the AM towers, so the app just always is crystal clear.
Yeah, great, good. So I'd like to put the links, or this. We'll put the link to Relevant Radio's website in the descriptions for people to subscribe. Also, the head office, is that in Chicago, where you are?
Yeah. So they Relevant Radio merged with Immaculate Heart Radio, which was a California radio network, many years back, and they merged. So we had people in California, we had people in Green Bay, we had people across the country, and as Relevant Radio has grown, they've consolidated and centralized everything into one location, and that location is Chicago, Illinois. And this is another boon, another sort of moment of God's providence. There's no way Relevant Radio could afford a building large enough to house our operations. Like, it would have cost minimum $14, $15, $16 million to build an office that could house what we needed. COVID happened, and corporate real estate prices dropped like a rock. And the UAW, the United Auto Workers Union, didn't want their headquarters anymore. and it's in Chicago. And so they sold a building that would cost probably about $14 to $16 million to build. They sold it for $4 million, pennies on the dollar. Relevant Radio
Wow.
bought it and was able to retrofit it to have state-of-the-art broadcasting technology throughout the entire building. So we were able to buy it for around $4 million and then spend the money that we saved on making it state-of-the-art.
Wow. Praise God. I have to come check it out next time I'm in the States. We
Yes,
hope to
you
be there
absolutely
next
will.
year. How many staff members, just out of curiosity, how big is
So
it?
that's the crazy thing. So iHeartRadio, I want to look up this iHeartRadio, which is a comparable. They're a larger network. Employees number of, so they have iHeartRadio. iHeartRadio in 2022 had 11,000 employees. Now iHeartRadio is larger than Relevant Radio, admittedly, but that sort of gives you the scale. That thousands and thousands of employees. Relevant Radio has 70. We're operating a national
Wow.
radio network, and it's about as lean as you can be. And we're right now, as we record this in November, we're in the middle of a pledge drive. And one of the great ways that they've structured the finances in Relevant Radio is the pledge drives, normal talk radio, broadcast radio technique for raising money. We do it 4 times a year. That's our operating budget. All of the money, all the salaries, all that stuff comes from that operating budget. All of the extra money that Father Rocky and other people raise goes towards expansion and growth. So every single
Wow.
penny that is raised from, major donors giving to Relevant Radio's expansion and whatnot, that all goes towards buying new radio towers, buying new stations, developing advertising, all that stuff. And so Relevant Radio, I think the other thing that's remarkable about it is a lot of Catholic apostolates that I know, like many nonprofits, are risk averse. They really, really don't like taking risks. They sort of try and play things really safe. The Merry Beggars is a risk. It still is today. Like it's a big risk. It's unorthodox programming, not theologically, but in terms of delivery. Like it's
Glad you clarified
new,
that.
it's original, it's unique. Father Rocky, one of the reasons I love working with him is his appetite for risk is only matched by his ambition for what he wants Relevant Radio to accomplish. And so he's willing to take risks and go out, in Duke Altum, go out into the deep and risk things for Christ. And it's a super exciting time to be part of Relevant Radio because they're growing, they're building. And then I'm so grateful for that spirit of adventure that Father Rocky has, because it's allowed something like the Merry Beggars to find a home there.
Wow. What a great story. So Merry Beggars is the entertainment arm of Relevant
Yep.
Radio. And when are your episodes aired? For those who want to tune in, so we do have a bit of an international audience, but those in America, say when is it aired? If people want to tune in live or when they release.
The great thing about our programming is it's available whenever you want it. Our programming is released primarily digitally. So you can go to our website, thesaintspodcast.com. So that's just thesaintspodcast.com, and find all of our episodes there completely for free. Download. I mean, I think so far we've done St. Patrick, we've done Joan of Arc, we've done Pure Church of Frassati, Francis of Assisi, Carlo Acutis, John Paul II, Benedict, Juan Diego. This week we're doing Kateri, and we have like 23 more to go through next June. So if people want to listen to the episodes with all the actors and the sound effects and the music and the story, they can go to thesaintspodcast.com. And they'll also find there links to our other shows, On the Night Train, A Christmas Carol, The Quarantine Plays, all of our other productions. We're not currently airing our shows on Relevant Radio, and there's a boring technical reason for that, which is our show length varies a little bit from like 10 minutes to 50 minutes, and broadcast clocks are unforgiving. And so we need to figure out a way to regularize that to get that on a daily slot on the Relevant Radio Network. We were airing On the Night Train every Sunday before, but we're so focused on just getting this amount of high quality content out there that we made the judgment call earlier this year of like, okay, let's just focus on producing the best stories we can, getting a lot of episodes out there, and then we'll figure out how to get it on the network, next year.
Fantastic. Wow. So that's the website there. Now, you've named it after the Saints, which is your most recent series.
Yes.
So on the Night Train, people can, just very quickly, just a quick summary, the Night Train, 30 to 40 minute episodes. How many episodes are there?
21 episodes. 21 episodes.
21, and around that sort of time. That's an amazing effort.
We recorded for 6 weeks, 10 hours a day with around 40 actors. It was a heck of a summer.
Wow. And that story, ultimately, it's not necessarily, what would you say? It's something you've written, and what's it about?
So it's not a catechetical story. It's not, the Saints is obviously intended to help strengthen and encourage people's faith. A Christmas Carol, there are a lot of Catholic themes in there. I would argue there are a lot of Christian themes, but you wouldn't say that it's like a Catholic, a story. He doesn't make an argument for the primacy of the Pope or anything. On the Night Train, we wanted to write a story that was in the best tradition of mystery adventure stories. And so we're developing different ideas. We wanted to find something that would really appeal to families. And so we landed on this story, which follows two children, Edith and Paul Mallard, who accidentally end up on board their dad's night train. It's called the Night Train, which is in the first ever transcontinental steam engine race across America in the 1880s. So these two trains, George Pullman's train and Webster Wagner's train, are racing across America to try and be the first steam engine across America, and all the awards and accolades that come with that. And Edith and Paul Mallard get sucked up right into the middle of it. And there's lots of sabotage and mystery and adventure. And they have to solve the mystery of who is sabotaging the night train and save the train. It's an awesome series. I could talk about it all day long. I hope you'll check it out. I think you'll like it.
Awesome. I haven't heard that one. I've heard of it. I haven't got a chance to go through it. So yeah, looking forward to that. But I have gone for the Saints.
That's one of the fun things that we did with On the Night Train. We went a little bit overboard. Is if you go to onthenighttrain.com, there's an interactive map where you can follow the journey of the train through each episode to sort of give you a visual of the train going across America. And then for kids, we also created little cards for each of the main characters, where the family and the kids can meet the characters introduce themselves to the children, and there's like a little bio on each main character and stuff like that. So we tried really hard to make it like an immersive experience for our audience.
That's on the Night Train website.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, are these all linked, by the way? So, I'm going to put all these links in.
If you go to thesaintspodcast.com, that'll take you to our main website, themerrybeggars.com, and you can explore from there.
Fantastic. Well, as we end on this current one, the Saints, I'm listening to them in order. So we've completed St. Patrick, and you've got all these other saints, and I can't wait. I think it's a great series, and anyone can use it and get to know. Are you going to do the similar thing? I can just see from this your different characters, like of the Saints, any imagery that you might do. Are you thinking of, I guess, really getting as much out of this as possible? Because, I can see this becoming a lifelong journey.
Yeah. So currently there are a couple things that we're doing. One is we're developing part of our website right now, actually, that is going to allow people to not only listen to the episodes sequentially of the Saints, but actually find Saints very, very easily. So they'll be able to go to our website and go through all of the Saints as little collections, and you'll be able to find, Kateri Tekakwitha or Juan Diego or John Bosco or whatever. So it's not going to be, we're designing these series so that families can come back and listen to them years from now, decades from now, so on and so forth. And so we're trying to design the website to make it really easy for families to discover the Saints that they want to listen to, whether that episode was published last week or, a year ago or 5 years ago. The other thing we're doing is developing educational materials. So for each saint, we're going to be having discussion questions, word searches, coloring pages, all of these different materials that families can print down totally for free and use them in homeschooling and schools to help kids engage with the material a little bit more deeply. And then in terms of the future, I mean, yeah, I have a million ideas. And then the problem is, how do you actually pick the one or two ideas that you should execute on right now? So there are a lot of ideas I have, but for right now, all we're focused on is getting this initial batch of saints out. And then, God willing, we'll be able to succeed wildly, have it be financially sustainable, and then in fall 2024, continue telling a lot of these stories. One of the things that's beautiful about the saints is none of them, I forget who said this. I really should look up the source of this, but there's a quote I heard recently: holiness is a secret between you and God, which means the way that Charbel is holy, it might have some similar basic foundational principles to how Peter is going to be holy, but day to day, like, it is going to be unique to you, unique to me. The way that Joan of Arc was holy is very different from the way St. Patrick was holy, which is very different from the way Benedict of Nursia is holy, which is very different from the way Juan Diego and Kateri and Ignatius of Loyola. So as a producer, I love that, because it means that every week when we're telling a story, it's not the same structure. It's not the same story just with different names and voices. They really are completely different stories. Every single one of them has the same protagonist, which is God encountering these people's lives and lighting them on fire. But the way that happens is really different. I'll give you a quick example. Joan of Arc hears these voices of St. Margaret, St. Catherine, and St. Michael. She starts being formed in the faith through her relationship with them. And at the end, she has to defy her father, who wants to stop her leading the armies. And she has to, go and obey her heavenly father when her earthly father is trying to, suppress her vocation, which is a story that a lot of people who pursue their vocations have. Contrast that. And then she ends up going, putting on armor, cutting her hair, leading the French armies, and just, saving France. Contrast that with Bernadette of Lourdes, who is silent, is quiet, is humble. She also, resists her family in a little bit because they didn't want her pursuing catechism so passionately. But the way that she pursues holiness is radically different from the way that Joan of Arc does. She doesn't ever seek to become, a well-known visionary. She's not a preacher. She's a humble, simple girl who loves Our Lady, loves the Immaculate Conception. And at the end of the series, it ends with her, which is a direct quote from her. I forget exactly what it is, but it's something like, "I am a pencil in the hand of the Lord, who can discard me when he pleases." And the rest of her life, she lived in obscurity, and she didn't go on and do a ton of different things. Like, her holiness is unique to her. And so looking towards the future, my hope is just that we never get lazy with the stories of the saints. I think it's really easy when you're doing something like this. Catholic parents who are listening to this are probably not going to listen to it, are probably going to listen to it whether or not they're produced at an extremely high level or not. Yeah, I think it's really easy when you're producing Catholic or Christian content to get lazy, because your audience is going to listen to it, not necessarily because your content is so good, but because the culture is so bad. And I really hope that we never let ourselves get lazy and let the scales fall over our eyes, because if we have eyes to see, the stories of the saints are some of the most incredible, original, and unique stories that have ever happened in human history. So if we do our job well, then every single week is a new adventure, is an original adventure. And so in fall 2024, hopefully we'll be coming back with lots of beautiful, original, exciting adventures then.
Love it. Love it. How exciting. Thank you. I want to thank you for joining us I do want to leave you with a final thought and ask you to share your final thought. But just finally, the website again for those who want to know more and get in touch and listen to all this.
So you can go, the easiest URL to remember is thesaintspodcast.com. So you can just go to thesaintspodcast.com. That'll take you to our main website, and you can listen and enjoy from there.
Wow,
and I guess the other
free.
thing too is 100% free. Everything is 100% for free. Freely you've received, freely you shall give. That's sort of our philosophy around all of this. And you can give us your email, and then you'll receive the episodes every single day. You'll get a little email with the artwork. You click, you listen, and it's the easiest way to just make sure you don't miss an episode.
Awesome. I highly, highly recommend everyone get on now. Now, you, as a producer, as a story writer, you are basically a storyteller. Hearing your story now and sharing your own story, but how to create stories as a creative. And then there's so many people out there, I think, wanting to do something, with their creative skills for the faith and not knowing where to begin or not knowing how to start. And you've got a very inspiring story. But what sort of advice do you give for all those aspiring creatives out there and storytellers in whatever genre? I mean, people who are animators, people who are designers, people who are videographers, all sort of levels that are Catholic and wanting to evangelize this culture. You've touched on the importance of the quality, but just some final, I guess, words of wisdom from yourself, of a man who's traveled the road before.
I mean, there are a lot of things I could say. The first thing that comes to mind is just take action. Like, I think a lot of people talk a big game, and that's really fun to do. I do that sometimes, but ultimately the difference between someone who actually makes it and someone who doesn't is whether or not they take action. And the other thing too is, when you work with the best artists, so when you're working on Broadway or you're working with people who have just been at the top of the game, there's one thing that I keep on noticing again and again and again, which is the best artists love their craft. They're not in it they're not even in it for the impact that their work will have. They're not even in it to, affect the culture necessarily or change the world. They're in it because they love the craft of what they're doing. So a good example is one of our writers is an Oscar-nominated director, and I was intimidated. He'll know who he is when he hears this. But I was intimidated when I started working with him because I was like, oh, Oscar nomination, that's big. He is the most down-to-earth, quirky, normal dude I've ever worked with. And the one thing I love about him is it's so clear he has an evident love of the craft, of writing, of directing, of storytelling and whatnot. And the way, whether you do that, whether you have that or not, is just to get going, to start making, to start creating. Mm-hmm. So if you want to be a writer, there's a very simple process. Write. If you want to be a director, find something to direct. If you want to be a sound designer, start doing sound design. We live in the age of the internet. You can find how to do any of those things using Google. Now you can use AI and get it to teach you even more thoroughly. There's, in some sense, I'm just repeating the Nike slogan, just do it. But that's been true in my life. I mean, the other thing I'll say is you don't know where the path is going to lead. So I never in a million years thought that my career, so far anyways, would be producing radio theater. Like, that was the farthest thing from my mind. The only thing I knew was that I was following one step after another, after another, after another, after another. And then at the end, you look back and you say, oh, that's where this was leading to. But when you're in the middle of it, all you can do is take the opportunity in front of you and make the absolute most of it that you can. When I was producing the first radio plays with the Merry Beggars, I didn't know it would lead to anything. I just knew that I was passionate about creating something that moved me. And if you as an artist or as a creative have that spark that makes you passionate about quality, then you need to follow that. And the only way that that gets trained is by actually doing. Two other thoughts, because this is something that I think about a lot. One is structure. If you're a writer, I don't believe in writer's block, because I've found that if you give someone a paycheck and a deadline, writer's block somehow always evaporates. The thing that helps you get rid of it is focusing on the structure, which is the craft. So if you're a writer, you need to know the structure of writing. You need to know that if you're writing a story, you need a character that has an objective. That objective has an obstacle in between the character and the objective. And the character navigates that obstacle by using tactics to get around that obstacle. That's all a story is it's someone wanting to get somewhere who gets stopped, and then the story is how they get around whatever that thing is stopping them. Okay. It's not more complicated than that. Now, there are a lot of layers to it, and there are a lot of ways you can play with that. But if you have that structure in mind, then when you're stuck on a Tuesday night thinking, I'm not inspired anymore, I don't know what to do, you can say, okay, well, I know, is the objective really clear with my main character? If it's not, great. I'm going to do some research into the historical grounding of my story, and then they'll be able to get some juices flowing about, well, what could possible objectives be, or what could possible obstacles be? And so for me as a producer, the most valuable tool I've ever learned is like the structure of writing and how to use that to shape story. That's been one invaluable thing, but that applies to any craft, right? If you're a musician, you need to know chord structure. You need to know the structure of scales. You need to know how to string things together and in dissonance to be able to bring tension and harmony. I'm not a musician, if you can tell. So but there's a similar craft. I know with acting, there's a craft to it. If you are relying on, this is like a whole nother podcast, but if you're relying on your
2.0.
Yeah, right. If you're relying on your own sort of momentary emotions to create a work of art, you will always fail, because you're a human being. Your emotions are unstable. If you look back at the great traditions in art, they were never, this really comes from a 20th or 19th century romanticism, which says that art is really the expression of internal emotional states. But really, if you look back at the history of any quality art tradition, it's always about craft. And it's always about knowing how to use craft to create a work of art. And then when moments of inspiration come, those channels have already been carved by craft so that inspiration can flow and create something great, because you already have iambic pentameter so deeply ingrained in your mind that flows. But it doesn't work to just rely on inspiration. And then the last piece of advice I'll give to any artist or any creative is get feedback. Get feedback early and often and constantly. You don't know if what you're making is good or bad. And any time that someone criticizes something that I've made, I have two reactions. One is, how dare you? You don't know what you're talking about. What I've created is beautiful and wonderful. And then the second reaction is, oh, shoot, they're right. Because you need that constant piece of feedback. Feedback is feedback. People are going to react to your stuff, your work, in tons of different ways. Some of the saint stories that I absolutely love, our audience sometimes, or some members in our audience says, well, I didn't really like this one. Some of our saint series that I was like, oof, this is sort of a weaker one. I've had like 3 or 4 people come up to me and say, this one was my absolute favorite. So you're never going to be able to please everyone. And that's not necessarily the point, but it's so important to just constantly get feedback on your work. If you want to be an artist, if you want to be a creative, do it, start moving, develop your craft, and start bringing your work to other people to get feedback. It's so invaluable as an artist.
Praise God. Thank you so much. That was great. Excellent work. Well, we're out of time. I wish we can keep going, but we're going to have to wrap it up there. But love to have you on again, and just I'm praying for your work. I mean, you're still a young man, and I'm excited for, you've done so much already, and I'm excited what is in store for you in the future. You know, what are the next 20, 30 years in store for you? And I'm just praying God continues to bless you the way he has so far, and keep going. It's going to have an impact on our culture. We desperately need it.
Well, you've got 9 children to entertain, and my mission is to make your job of parenting as easy as possible. So, I mean, the way that I think about our work is our mission is to support the most important work that people are doing, which is raising families. So if our shows can help parents, make it a little bit easier for parents to raise children who love God, who are excited about their faith, and who jump into life with courage and adventure and boldness, then that'll be a life well lived.
Praise God. Well said. Thanks again. Well, Peter Atkinson, thank you so much. God bless you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Charbel.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that podcast. My name's Charbel Raish, and until next time, God bless.